religion, but not all of it. Chile put a total ban on abortion for the past 20 years, so it isn't as if people started becoming more religious during the past 20 or 30 years, Nika. There seems to be some kind of backlash as well. The moment there is advancement, some groups start mobilizing. That's one reason. But I think we've advanced more than sort of gone backwards.
So how will a case like now in Chile, like in Brazil, how will the case influence the debate?
All these cases influence the debate quite a lot. I think more and more people in the region are aware that women should have the right to choose how many children they have and when they have it, and should have all the support available, medical and physical, when they are raped. And unfortunately, rape is rampant in the region and in many other ones. So I think women and men in the region are more aware that sexual and reproductive rights of women and girls in the region have to advance.
I was talking to Guadalupe Marengo. Stephanie Shirley arrived in Britain at the age of 5 on the Kindertransport, one of hundreds of Jewish children who escaped the Holocaust in 1939. Well, she's now Dame Stephanie Shirley, generally known as Steve, a name she adopted when she founded a software company in 1962. It was a help in a male-dominated industry, and her aim was to provide employment for other women. Well, she's now a philanthropist, having sold her company, the author of Let It Go, her autobiography, and she's on the Women's Hour power list. Shall I call you Steve or Dame Stephanie?
Yes, please.
Steve, thank you. What was the impact of arriving here without your parents at the age of 5?
Well, what happens to all children who are traumatised early in life is that it does make them what they are as an adult. And even today, I'm very conscious of that stop, which is 75 years ago. I'm conscious that tomorrow is going to be different because I have this massive change, being sent to complete strangers in a different country, with a different language, with no money, no nothing. And it turned me into a patriot because I'm so grateful to Britain for having given me a home. It's turned me into somebody who welcomes change. And I try to make sure that because my life was saved from Nazi Germany at that time, that each day was worth saving. I try not to fritter my life away.
You were eventually reunited with your parents. How did you re-establish a relationship?
Well, poorly, really, Jenny. My father I really hardly knew. When I think how many nights I spent under the same roof with him, it's probably a couple of dozen. But he was enormously proud of me. My mother, I was reunited with, often quite significantly, but we never somehow bonded together. It can happen to children. Things happen. I'm really my foster parents' child. That's culture. It's a shame for the mother.
What was the motivation for setting up the company in 1962?
Well, I was very early in the computer industry. People describe me as a late pioneer. But there were a lot of women in the industry at that time because you needed mathematics and you learned about universities with these things. And the culture at that time was that when you married or when your first child was expected, you left and turned into a domestic goddess. But this seemed to be an incredible waste to the nation, and also for intellectual women, it really was debilitating to not have to go on with the culture of the building. So my company started as a company of women, a company for women, and it had very different team working culture that not only pioneered software, which at that time was given away free for the hardware, but actually provided opportunities for women, and I think was influential in professionalising women, especially in high tech.
Now, you called yourself Steve, wanted to employ women, but don't call yourself a feminist. Why not?
Well, I'm often asked that question. I think I'm a humanist. I really believe in the ability of any individual to make something of themselves, to make a difference in the world, and that's not gender related.
What difference did being Steve make?
Well, I had no responsibility in my business development letters when I was signing with that double feminine Stephanie Shirley being my marital name, of course. And when I started signing Steve Shirley, I did get some responses, and so I was getting some meetings with potential clients. In those days we called them customers, but there we are. And there was a sort of frisson of excitement or of surprise when I walked through the door and they realised that Steve was a she.
How did you respond to being called Puff?
Well, I was very surprised, apart from anything else, but delighted. I'm nearly 80 now, and it seems to me that any power that I had was when I was heading a large organisation with thousands of people involved, where you do have power. Now it seems to me that I have more influence. I've influenced the environment for women. I've influenced, in particular, I've made a repositioned autism in public awareness. I do a lot of that. And I'm really proud of that. Glad that it was recognised.
You had one child Giles who had autism, which is obviously why you became so interested in it. And I know that at one point you considered a family suicide pact. Why was that?
Well, that's a difficult question to ask in a journey, isn't it? But a long time ago, autism really was, and I think it occasionally still is, a devastating disorder. It absolutely upset all my life. We couldn't do anything. My child was very, very and the quality of his life, the quality of our lives, was so awful that we did not manage. So
How did you recover?
I think my husband at that time was stronger on a moral issue, felt issue, and that was shortly through we did have to child because I just ceased to function.
Well, you were trying to find a cause for autism. How close are you to finding it?
I think before that we've got to find out what autism is that's distinct from what it looks like. We're quite clear that it's a brain disorder, we're quite clear that it's a genetic disorder that is impacted by environmental changes. But it's not going to be next year or 5 years, but it might be in the lifetime of today's children. So there is really very good help from the work that's going on in places like Edinburgh University, where they're really looking at the development of the brain, and with animal models, mice and rats, they can literally, not speaking at a lay level of course, turn a mouse into an autistic mouse. It loses its little squeak, it cowers in the corner and dissocially. More excitingly still, they can reverse that. And I think for parents that is very exciting. Not that many parents or all parents really want to avoid children with autism. I just know that I hate that if you diagnose autism pre-birth, the serious autisms, I would have brought quite enormous hesitation.
Now, you've talked in the past about survival and dealing with depression during your life. What role has being a survivor played in your giving away meaning to crime?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, and I certainly talk about it in the book, when you have survived some enormous something, you really need to sort of justify why you've survived, and you would think you would